Hello, WestJet Pilots and other podcast listeners. I'm Captain Desmond Jordan, and welcome to this edition of PIREP. I'm here today in Vancouver. I have the pleasure of being joined by our negotiations team, comprised of Captain Andrew Hamber. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks, Des.
Excellent. And First Officer Tracy Law.
I'm doing good, thanks, Des.
Excellent. And also First Officer Joel Lautenschlager. How are you today, Joel?
I'm great. Thanks, Des.
It's my first opportunity to sit down with you guys in a podcast. Let me first start off by saying, on behalf of all the pilots, a very heartfelt thank you for all the work that you guys have put in. I've been an observer from the outside and seen some of it. You guys are the hardest working people in this association, and I think I can speak on behalf of all the pilots when I say thank you very much. Let me just start off by asking you a few questions about what we're doing here, what we've done already. How have you guys felt about how the negotiations went in general? Andrew, I'll start with you.
Well, everything actually went fairly well. Negotiations were always cordial with the company. We had pushback on lots of items, and we pushed back on lots of items, but discussions were fairly cordial, and I think it led to a better product. Excellent.
Joel, could I ask you, what do you think in the negotiations that we were involved in? What would you say your biggest takeaway was, the thing that you were most satisfied with that came out of negotiations?
Well, Des, I think the biggest thing I've been satisfied with throughout the whole negotiations was the unity of the pilot group. Like, the company's tried every aspect imaginable, like, over the past 4 years to try and divide us. Like, with Swoop being a separate position and everything else, like, the fact that we were able to remain united as a pilot group and achieve what we have today, like, I think that's truly remarkable.
I would agree with you 100%. You know, I've been here for a long time, and I can honestly say that these last 6 months, I have not been prouder at any point in my career at WestJet to say that, hey, you know what, I am a WestJet pilot. So I think that you guys had a big part to do with that. Many of the things that we did as an association had a part to do with that. But yeah, it's been a special time for me, I would say. Tracy, how about yourself? Can you think of anything that sticks out as exceptional or stands out as a real keynote moment in these negotiations for you?
Well, I think I'd like to push back on the comment that you made that we're the hardest working group in the association, because I've looked around and with the SPSC and Christina and all the work that everybody else has put in, and I've watched the LEC elected reps and the MEC members, and they've worked just as hard. So I think it's watching those guys, those volunteers put in the hours, that was special for me.
I appreciate you throwing me under the bus there. No, I'm just kidding. I would agree with you 100%. There are many groups within our association who've worked very, very hard, and they're all the hardest working groups in the association. So you're 100% correct. Okay, so let's get down to some of the nuts and bolts of our conversation here. Andrew, you know, throughout this process, we had spoken quite a bit about a North American contract, a North American standard contract. In your mind, how do you think we did in attaining that? Or how would you even, in your mind, or in your words, go about defining something like that?
Good question, Des. That's actually a pretty hard question to answer. However, I'll do my best here. We got some of the big wins we got through this contract were scope. Getting rid of LOU2, bringing Swoop into the fold, capturing language on Sunwing. Outside of scope, take-home pay has always been a big issue for our pilots, and we managed to clean that up quite well. WSP was also a bit of a contentious issue with the amount that we had to contribute, so another big win there. You know, a lot of people came here. It was a lifestyle type place to live and work, and I think we got a lot of that sorted out again with the company. The company recognizing that to draw pilots in, we need to see how we can increase the lifestyle a little better, and then as well overall pay increases. You know, 15.5% may not seem like much to a lot of people. However, when you look south of the border, those rates were maybe a touch higher than that. You know, Delta was 18%, things like that. However, Delta and American and a lot of those carriers haven't had a contract increase in years. It's been 3, sometimes 4 years in places. So that 18% increase it loses a little value on that.
Along those same lines, it's interesting. We talk quite often about what the American carriers have and we don't have, but I'm wondering maybe, Joel, if you could touch on some of the things that we've come across in negotiations that they don't have that we do have.
Yeah, sure does. There's actually quite a bit that we often take for granted as WestJet pilots that we do have that our peers don't have. Even looking at things as simple as our minimum monthly guarantee of 77.5 hours. Like that's fairly high in the industry, if not one of the higher ones. A lot of our peers in other airlines have variable MMGs or they're down near 70 hours. So when you see hourly rates that are slightly exceeding ours, when you start to figure out the base salary, ours is actually higher, even though the hourly rate is lower. So stuff like that, vacation credit hours per day, we have some industry leading numbers there, as well as a few other metrics. We really do stand out as a major North American airline.
Yeah, it seems that way. So often in these situations, we get around to contract negotiations and our focus is primarily on money or lifestyle. But my understanding is there are numerous gains that we made in regards to safety or how our safety committees and other committees have influence on what's going on within our company. Is that true, Tracy?
Absolutely, Des. The cooperation that we had with our SMEs throughout all of this was impressive. We've had many meetings with our centralized safety committee, our scheduling review committee. A lot of them came down to the bargaining table to go through language with us, make sure that we get what we're looking for. And we have made some significant gains in some of those areas of the contract that people don't generally turn to when they first get the contract. I mean, we've made significant gains in the training section with our pilot training committee. We've made significant gains in the hotel section with the help of Wendy. Our Steve Kurzbauer was down helping us out with our safety section. So it's those small pieces that generally pilots don't look at or appreciate until they need them. But we've got significant improvements in the contract on those sections.
Excellent. A lot of the time as pilots, we look at the compensation piece, but I think most of our pilots know now, or they have learned if they didn't know previously, a contract's not worth the paper it's written on if there isn't scope language to underpin it. Joel, I understand that was one of your areas of expertise.
Yeah, thanks, Des. I kind of fell into it, to be honest with you, mostly because I was available at the time to start looking at it. So what we did, everybody knows our current CA1 scope language was the result of an arbitrated agreement going forward, right? So we need to turn to every ALPA resource available through our legal counsel, Joel Hoderick, the Director of Representation, Andrew, down in Valo. We had external counsel from downtown Toronto, as well as multiple experts in scope from ALPA down in the States. We set out to try and overhaul the scope language. So I think the important takeaway with scope here is everything's prohibited unless it's allowed explicitly in the scope language.
Yes, most definitely. And as you mentioned before, this is our first CA had quite a bit of an arbitrated component to it, not the least of which LOU 2. With that in mind, what exactly is going to be happening to Swoop?
So Swoop was one of the final pieces of the puzzle that came together for us, and we think it presents a pretty good path forward for both us as pilots within at WestJet and the company as well. So by October, I believe it was, 5 tails are going to be transferred from Swoop over to the WestJet AOC, at which point the number of maximum tails at Swoop will be reduced by 5. Another 5 tails are going to happen in the spring next year, and the remaining 6 will happen in the fall next year as well. So while we don't know what will happen to the Swoop brand, and that remains a business decision for the company, we do know that all the pilots that are flying the Swoop aircraft will be at WestJet wages and working conditions going forward.
That's good news. That's really good news. Never a dull moment in aviation. We get Swoop taken care of. Next on the list, Sunwing. How are we going to manage that integration going forward? Andrew?
Good question, Des. Sunwing represents an interesting conundrum. However, with the legal counsel we've had and understanding how the process works and the language captured within the scope section as well as the LOU with regard to Swoop operational integration, we have a process going forward which will involve the CARB and an application for single employer. That has a certain timeline on it, and once that application gets filed, we start the process of operational integration. That may not mean that the AOCs are combined. However, what it does is sets the course for the two bargaining units getting together and having a vote on who's going to be the successor bargaining agent. So ALPA and Unifor are the two bargaining units right now. All the pilots will have a vote on which one will be represented moving forward. The deal that we organized with the company on that is if ALPA is the successor bargaining agent, we'll stick with our contract. If ALPA doesn't stay as a successor bargaining agent, then what happens is you have to then negotiate a joint collective agreement.
Okay. With the language that we have in this TA, if it were successfully ratified, how confident are you that we'd be successful in A, the wind down of Swoop, and B, the integration of Sunwing?
I think the language with Swoop specifically I'll speak to, I think it's understood with the company. Like, the amount of efficiency gains that'll be gained by the company with the combined operation and no duplication of resource and the pilots being able to flow between different colored tails, I think that'll be immense. And the company will realize that pretty quickly. So I think they're committed to this path forward with Swoop. As far as Sunwing, obviously there's a little bit more integration that needs to happen, mostly due to the acquisition of a whole separate airline and orders from government about minimum service standards that need to be maintained. So I think that one will just take a little bit more time to be properly integrated.
Okay, so obviously when contracts come up for renegotiation, the big thing that's on the pilots' minds is compensation. So in your opinion, Andrew, what are the highlights or the points of this agreement that you think people should know most about?
Well, I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding in how the rates were calculated. So running through that, we managed to capture a 15.5% raise. So that's the first thing. First year increase was 15.5%. Looking at how the WSP system operates, it was recognized that it's a huge detriment to take-home pay, with us having to contribute 20% just to get a 20% match from the company. So the company was willing to discuss it, and we managed to move half of the WSP into pay rates, and then the other half, that 10%, will get added on, and it doesn't require a pilot to contribute in order for the company to put that 10% into Manulife now. So for people that didn't contribute WSP, it's a huge gain, and for people that did, it's a huge gain in take-home pay. So two kind of key factors in our mandate were captured in kind of one section.
Okay. So when I kind of look at it, I kind of break it down into kind of a layman's terms. I look at it as new money and existing money that's been released. So the new money, if I'm correct, is the 15.5% plus the 3%, 3%, and 2.5%.
Yes.
And then the existing money that's been released would be the 20% WestJet share purchase plan, which has been broken down to 9.1%, which goes on to our hourly rates. And then the 10% that is still in the WSP program, and the stock payout, which is now broken down into 24 payments to be made on each paycheck. Is that about right?
That's exactly correct, Des.
What are the financial benefits of having things done that way?
So the increase is the increase, and obvious benefits there. Moving the money from total WSP of 20% to 10% allows for both increased pay rates, which, always the question was, why don't we get WSP on overtime? Well, now with moving half the WSP into the pay rates, you're getting that overtime on that WSP. As well, looking forward, as we've captured language on finally achieving a pension. If the association finds one that meets all the metrics, that money that's been put into the pay rates now becomes pensionable.
How does the language on the pension differ in this CA than it did in the previous one?
Well, the previous CA talked about basically having a conversation with the company, and that's fine, but you can always have a conversation with the company. This language actually has targeted metrics that a pension would have to meet, but if it meets those metrics, the company, if at the association's discretion or direction, I should say, will attempt to negotiate including us into that pension.
One of the things that I have been seeing pop up with the questions quite a bit is the long-term, short-term, who pays for it, how's it paid for, and what's a LOLOP question. Tracy, can you speak to that at all?
Absolutely. I think there's been some confusion around this. The company has always been able to pay for the short-term disability. That's just a box that you tick when you select your benefits. We recognize that long-term disability was something that a lot of the pilots wanted, and for the company to pay for the long-term disability. We pushed really hard on that piece, got a lot of pushback from the company on that, and ultimately we're not able to secure that. But we recognized that it did affect the pilots' take-home pay. So what we chose to do was take the cash equivalent payment that we get for the stock options, split that out over the 24 pay periods per year, and then put that as a line item on the pay stub so that it would help offset the premiums of the long-term disability. Now, we introduced the term LOLOP because that's what Jazz uses for their line item, and we thought that as an industry, the pilots would understand what that meant. Unfortunately, it has caused more confusion than we expected. So we're probably going to go away from that terminology and just put it on the line item.
What exactly does LOLOP stand for?
LOLOP stands for loss of license offset premium.
Okay.
And the reason Jazz called it that was so that only the pilots would be eligible for it because they're the only employee group that has a license. And like I said, we were hoping to use that term thinking it would resonate with pilots, and unfortunately it didn't. So we're going to change that up and probably just have it as cash equivalent payment on the line item on the paycheck. But it's there to allow pilots to have that additional cash to cover off some of their benefits or whatever else they want to spend it on.
So that would fall under the existing money that is freed up for us to spend in a different way.
Absolutely.
Okay, I understand.
So I just want to speak to the question about the North American Standard Contract. A lot of people look at that or say that term, and they're looking at one metric, which is the pay scales. I just want to send a huge shout out to John Janicki and Mike Matika. They came in and endless hours going through sections 8, which is scheduling, section 9, which is hours of service, and section 10, which is reserve. They spoke to their colleagues down in the States at multiple different ALPA airlines, and we managed to find best practices for a North American industry standard system, and that's what they've given us and produced in those sections for us. So just wanted to sort of recognize that a North American Standard Contract isn't just that one metric to pay, that it involves many things from the reserve system to the call-out system to reassignment to scheduling. And I do believe that those guys delivered that for us.
So we've talked quite a bit about the dollars and cents of this agreement in this negotiation process. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I'm going to ask you, what is your personal favorite thing to take away from this agreement?
Well, Des, I think honestly there might be two for me. One, going into this, we had two huge weights that were on the backs of the pilots here. One relating to the separate wages and working conditions for Swoop, and two, the pending acquisition of Sunwing. The fact that both of those were resolved to our satisfaction throughout this whole process, and we still make gains and everything else, like that's a major thing. And two, looking back as to where we've come in the past 4 years, we had an arbitrated agreement 4 years ago after decades of work rules with previous working agreements, right? So now that we've torn down all the remaining legacy portions of the agreement that don't work for us anymore with 1,800 pilots, we're able to build up for what we need it to be. So going forward now, I think CA3 and beyond, we're looking at a much better place where the foundation's in place, the formulas are written, and now we can truly grow at a much greater pace.
That is exciting. How about you, Andrew?
I would also like to probably put forth a couple. I have had the absolute pleasure of working with two of the most hardworking individuals I've ever seen in my life. It's been magic watching this. We had that's with Joel and Tracy. We had Mark Berger come in and help us out as well, which was great. He helped us focus a little bit when we needed to, and was instrumental in where we went. Second thing I would say is. I had a nice chat with a first officer, fairly new, a couple of years in, yesterday after a road show in Calgary, and he said I wanted to thank you very much for what you did, and this contract is going to be life-changing for me. So that's really all I need.
Yeah, that's pretty special. That's pretty special. How about you, Tracy?
I guess I'm going to have to come up with two as well now. I guess the first one was I'd never really been involved with the association or the union before this, and just to be part of the team and the camaraderie and the work ethic was just amazing to see. And I from a personal growth standpoint, that was amazing for me. From a negotiation standpoint, at the end of the negotiations, we had a discussion with Peter Simpsons, who is the lead conciliator for the government, while we were waiting for the LEC to vote on the contract or the TA that we'd brought forward. And he said something that sort of really sort of hit home, I think, for all of us, which he had never seen an employee group fundamentally change the way a company does business. And the fact that you work so hard and you just drive towards the goal that you don't actually see what you're achieving until you get there. And I think hearing that from someone who's been in the industry for 30 some odd years was pretty special. And the fact that we had made gains in 80% of the articles that we put forward. So I think it's one of those, you don't recognize what you've done until you step away a little bit. And I absolutely have to give kudos to the two guys standing here with me, that I don't think we would have accomplished it without the team that we brought forward.
You know what, Tracy, building off what you said, Peter Simpson, I think his name was, he said that this process has fundamentally changed the way WestJet does business. I think it's fundamentally changed the way this pilot group looks at itself and its future, and that is really worth something. So to all of you guys, for all the hard work that you've done, thank you very much. And to all the pilots that are out there listening to this podcast, thank you very much as our union brothers and sisters. This really has been a significant event in our history. And so, as always, stay informed, stay up to date, read your fast reads, but more importantly at this time, read the contract, get informed, ask questions, get them answered, and most importantly, vote. Thanks again for tuning into this edition of PIREP.